So you want to do Inktober this year in 2024, but you might have some questions right off the bat. What kinds of things do you need? Does everything have to be done in ink from start to finish? Is there some special sketchbook that all of this has to take place in? So today we're going to talk about Inktober Supplies, kind of the baseline for what you need, which is very little, by the way, and then also some additional options. Mostly just talking about things that I do. This will be maybe the 5th time that I've done it, and I think that it's a wonderful thing to participate in. So, first thing I want to talk about is paper. This is a pretty standard run-of-the-mill sketchbook. I picked this up on Amazon a couple years back. It's got 100 pages, it's 68-pound paper, nothing crazy or special. I've done a lot of ink work in here over the years. In fact, if you've been following along on any of my robots or my podcasts, a lot of the prep work for things happens in sketchbooks just like this. So a sketchbook just like this is probably what you have lying around, and this will work perfectly. I've done several batches of Inktober in sketchbooks just like this one. Now, I've used many different kinds of ink. In general, everything works fine, but you will notice that there is some bleed from some of the kind of higher density inks. So, if this doesn't strike your fancy, I can take you to something like this. This is my current sketchbook. This is the one I'm working on with everything for Smogest. This is Bristol paper. It's a little bit heavier weight, it's very, very smooth, and it works really well with ink. That's predominantly, if not entirely, what I've done in here. So you can start to see some of the dragons. I've been very, very happy with how this sketchbook has worked. I think I picked this up from Hobby Lobby, but that's where I got it. They were on sale, and my wife insisted that I get some extra sketchbooks. So this kind of sketchbook is the one that I am using this year, and I really prefer the Bristol paper. It's wonderful if you're doing just ink. So that's another option. Thirdly, I have this below, which is not a sketchbook, actually. It is just loose paper. You'll notice again, it is Bristol. Bristol is probably my favorite paper to use for this kind of thing. But these are just loose sheets of paper. My camera's going to struggle to stay in focus here because there's nothing to focus on the paper. I will be doing a lot of my work this year probably on things like this, if not a watercolor paper that I can actually go back over and ink later. And that's because I'm going to be using these for other things. I want to be able to scan them, I want to be able to use them for a children's book I'm working on, and so I will be using something a teeny bit different. I will likely be using this for my ink work this year. But the reason I showed all the other things is I've used all the other things. This is hot pressed paper, it's very smooth. It's quite expensive, but I believe this came from a gift card. And this is going to be what I'm going to use this year. It's going to allow me to do all the ink, and then if I decide later on that I want to watercolor on top of it, it will be very accepting of that medium. Okay, so that kind of takes care of papers. The next thing I want to talk about is pencils, because a lot of you are going to want to draw ahead of time. You're not going to want to do 100% of your work in ink. And that is totally understandable. So these are the basics that I'm using this year. There is nothing fancy here. This is a just straight up normal mechanical pencil. I have nicer ones, but these are the ones that I've used over the years. You don't have to use mechanical pencils. I like the reliability and not having to sharpen it, but my mind is shifting over time. I've been using these a lot on the recommendation from one of my friends in the Discord server. They're Prismacolor Kohl Erase. They come in reds and blues, at least, and I've been using these just to get my sketches started. There's something about using the red that just feels fancy, and sometimes you just need that little push, the little bit of fanciness. With these, then, I use Prismacolor erasers. They're cheap, and it just gives me the ability to erase things once I start putting my ink on. You don't have to use pencils, but I think sometimes people are afraid, or they feel like it's disingenuous to use a pencil for their sketch ahead of time. And just dismiss that thought, get rid of it, because this is about you as an artist pursuing something and growing. So don't let those preconceived notions mess with you. If you want to use pencils, you use pencils. And lastly, let's talk about the ink. First and foremost, this will take care of you. This is a Bic ballpoint pen. I have used these for tremendous amounts of drawing over the years, and I love them. If you don't have any other supplies except for random pieces of printer paper and a ballpoint pen, you will be fine for Inktober. This is just another one I keep here. Now, for the past couple years, these have been my predominant resource. These are microns, Pigma microns. That's a 01, I've got a 005. I have a bunch of others, but generally I use those two the most. Recently, I've fallen in love with their brush pen versions. I have several of those. I have that one. I have this one by Faber-Castell. And then this giant one, which is awesome because I had some people last year who were very sad when they watched me using one of these little guys covering in large chunks of space. They're like, oh my goodness, someone get this guy a brush. So these are my general resources. I do have this, which I might use for part of it. This is a different kind of brush pen, and it's wonderful. It's a sepia tone, so it's a brown. But there's nothing that says that you can't use red or blue or anything fancy. You can use whatever you want. The idea is to use ink and to follow the prompts, but you can do whatever you want. Now, there are some fancier options that I will probably try to use this year, which is to actually use some dip pens. And I have a couple here I can show you. These are my dip pens. These are a little bit more finicky, a little bit more temperamental, but they can be really lovely. And part of what I enjoy about ink, and always have, is that the ink's got a temperament of its own. It does its own thing. So here are some of the inks that I have. Nothing crazy special. I did just pick this one up. It's called Blue Flame, and it's got kind of a sheen to it. I haven't used it yet, but I'm excited to try. And this is just your standard black archival ink. So these are my pens that I will be using, but for many years, I just used this Micron 01, and that is really all you need. In fact, you don't even need that. You could just use a ballpoint pen. They're wonderful. So if you are interested in Inktober this year, I would encourage you, whatever supplies you have, dive in. If you've got printer paper and a ballpoint, fantastic. If you've got some microns, they're wonderful. If you want to get fancy things, go for it. But at the end of the day, I would just encourage you to dive into Inktober. It's a blast. The challenge will be good for you. It's kind of nice to have that little bit of accountability, but don't get hung up on supplies. These are mine, and this is what I'm sticking to. Well, please share in the comments below. I would love to hear if you're going to join in for Inktober, if you've done it before, what you're excited about, and maybe what you're fearful of. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.